Keith Urban is not just a musician, he is a force of nature, a virtuoso whose guitar strings sing with both elegance and fire. He is the thunderstorm that swept through country music and rewrote its rhythm with heart, soul, and staggering brilliance, a man who turned raw emotion into melody and made stadiums weep and rejoice in equal measure. From the rolling hills of New Zealand to the grand stages of Nashville, Keith Urban rose not as a trend or a passing star but as a legend carved into the very soul of American music, his voice carried across continents, his talent undeniable, his charm effortless. With Grammy Awards in hand and a career that redefined the boundaries of country music, he lived the kind of life most only dream about: glittering stages, a love story with Hollywood icon Nicole Kidman, an empire of sound and success. At the peak of his fame, he was untouchable, unstoppable, radiant. But today, nearing 60, his life is far from the glamorous image many still believe. The world sees only the spotlight, while behind the curtain lies a life marked by chaos, hardship, profound loss, and wounds that never fully healed. Before the world knew his name, before the awards and acclaim, there was only a small, sensitive boy surrounded by storms. Born on October 26, 1967, in Whangar, New Zealand, Keith Lionel Urban's earliest memories were not of applause but of movement, uprooting, shifting ground, and a constant search for belonging. When he was just 2 years old, the Urban family relocated to Cobble, Queensland, Australia, hoping for a fresh start, but tragedy struck too soon. At 9, Keith watched helplessly as his family home was engulfed in flames, reducing everything: photos, toys, clothes, dreams, to ashes, and leaving them with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the mercy of strangers. All we had left, he would later recall, was each other and the kindness of neighbors who showed up with boxes of clothes. Yet the fire outside was only a flicker compared to the inferno within. Behind the walls of their modest home lay another destruction, one without smoke but with scars just as deep. His father, Robert Bob Urban, a passionate lover of country music and an unpredictable alcoholic, introduced Keith both to the guitar and to fear. "I don't remember him ever telling me he loved me," Keith once admitted, words that were not just sad but devastating for a child aching for affection and finding only silence, anger, and fists. Still, flickers of hope remained. One day, Bob placed a sign in the window of his convenience store seeking a guitar teacher for his son, a rare, fragile gesture of love that changed everything. It led Keith to Sue McCarthy, the mentor who shaped his earliest musical years. At 4, he strummed a ukulele. By 6, he gripped a guitar like armor. Music wasn't a hobby, it was a shield, a lifeline, a voice in a house ruled by mood swings and silence. Through music festivals like Tamworth and performances with Jenny Wilson, Keith began stacking awards, including the coveted Golden Guitar. To the world, he was a prodigy. Behind the applause, he was a boy struggling to breathe. As a teenager playing smoky pubs and bars, his parents chauffeuring him from gig to gig, Keith tried to make sense of the chaos inside him. The applause felt good, but it never silenced the emptiness. "Music saved me," he later said. "It gave me somewhere to go when home didn't feel like home." Those words say everything. His childhood wasn't just difficult, it was devastating, lonely, and unfair, yet it forged the soul that would someday stun the world. His early years, the fire, the fists, the forgotten hugs, didn't break him. They built him, turning pain into poetry, wounds into rhythm, and silence into sound. And this is where the real story begins, not on a glamorous stage or beside a Hollywood star, but in the smoldering ruins of a boyhood he was never allowed to fully live. Keith Urban's journey from child prodigy to global country icon was neither instant nor easy. It was a long, grinding road paved with rejection, resilience, and raw faith. After clawing through a childhood scarred by fire and fear, his earliest performances were anything but glamorous. At 8, he played in dingy pubs and dusty fairgrounds across Queensland, gripping a guitar larger than his frame while his parents, still recovering from their own emotional storms, became de facto tour managers, driving him from gig to gig in hopes that music might save them all. Survival, not stardom, was his pursuit. By 15, his talent was unmistakable. He had the hands of a virtuoso and the soul of someone who had lived many lifetimes. Yet despite early TV appearances like New Faces in 1983 and award-winning performances with Jenny Wilson at Tamworth, his fame remained confined to small-town stages. The world had not yet heard the thunderstorm brewing within him, though his biggest stages were slowly stirring on the horizon. Like Mark Knopfler and Lindsey Buckingham, Keith began blending country twang with electric fire, a sound uniquely his, yet difficult to classify. This artistic originality made him powerful but hard to market. Still, he pushed forward. In 1990, he released his debut album in Australia under EMI, but it barely registered outside local circles. For most, that would have been enough, but Keith Urban wasn't most people. In 1992, he made a terrifying leap, leaving behind home, security, and every safety net to chase his dream in Nashville, Tennessee, a move that felt less like relocation and more like spiritual defiance. "I knew no one. I had no plan B," he later said, recalling how Nashville greeted him with indifference. Doors didn't just close, they slammed. He played background guitar for other acts, wrote songs for others to sing, and swallowed his pride more times than he could count. His mid-90s band, The Ranch, showed promise but fizzled commercially. Nights were long, rejection relentless, and the shadows of his childhood trauma never far behind. "Maybe I'm not meant to do this," he once confessed, but he didn't stop, he couldn't. Music had become his oxygen. Every empty bar, every unreturned call, every song written for someone else hardened his resolve. He wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing freedom. Finally, in 1999, 7 years after arriving in Nashville, he released his self-titled American debut album, and when But for the Grace of God hit #1, the boy from Queensland who played through pain finally tasted the triumph he had bled for. It wasn't just a victory, it was a resurrection, marking the beginning of a meteoric rise forged not from luck but from suffering and an unshakable will. Fame didn't arrive quietly, it roared into Keith Urban's life like a long-delayed promise fulfilled. His 1999 American solo album and its raw hit But for the Grace of God marked a turning point, signaling the arrival of a new kind of country star, one who fused grit with vulnerability and traditional twang with searing guitar solos. By 2002, Somebody Like You dominated the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart and was later named the biggest country hit of the decade, proof that the world had finally caught up to the sound he had carried for years. Yet success didn't erase scars, it spotlighted them. Despite global fame, he battled imposter syndrome and old whispers telling him he wasn't enough. Still, he pushed on. His 2004 album Be Here became a juggernaut with hits like Days Go By and Making Memories of Us, solidifying him as a genre-shaping force whose blend of country, rock, and pop drew massive, diverse audiences. Tours sold out, albums went triple platinum, and awards piled up: 4 Grammys, 15 ACM Awards, 13 CMAs, glittering achievements that were both milestones and weights on his shoulders. He became a household name with his role as a judge on American Idol from seasons 12 to 15, where his warmth, wit, and empathy shone. Yet behind the spotlight, he often felt like the lost boy from Kabul, still trying to prove his worth. By the mid-2000s, Keith's success wasn't just artistic but staggering financially: millions of albums sold, tours grossing tens of millions, television deals, endorsements, and his best-selling line of guitars eventually pushing his net worth to around $75 million. Through all the fame, music remained his lifeline, every lyric echoing the ghosts of where he came from. Keith Urban's rise wasn't a smooth crescendo but a climb of brutal peaks carved from valleys of rejection and doubt. His success wasn't about reaching the top but surviving everything it took to get there. And just when it seemed the darkness might consume him, a light appeared, steady, gentle, transformative. That light was Nicole Kidman. After surviving fire, silence, and a loneliness deeper than any arena could hold, her presence broke the cycle. Their meeting wasn't simply romantic, it was spiritual, the beginning of his redemption, and while the world watched a glamorous couple fall in love, few understood that behind the scenes, Nicole was fighting for his very life. Life and Keith, broken, ashamed, yet deeply moved, finally reached for the hand that refused to let go, and what followed was more than a marriage, it was a rebirth. They met in January 2005 at a Hollywood gala filled with stars and flashing cameras, yet amidst all the sparkle, Keith remembers only one presence: Nicole. For him, it wasn't love at first sight, it was something deeper, magnetic. Nicole Kidman saw past the fame and the image into the wounded man still trying to heal. Keith would later admit he waited 4 months before calling her, paralyzed by awe and self-doubt. Their bond grew quietly, deeply, away from headlines. Just a year later, on June 25, 2006, they were married in a candlelit ceremony in Sydney. The world saw a fairy tale, but to Keith, it was a lifeline. That beginning, though beautiful, wasn't without turbulence. 4 months into their marriage, Keith relapsed. The demons he had hidden returned, and the man who played before thousands found himself drowning in isolation. In a courageous act of love, Nicole staged an intervention, gathering friends, consulting addiction experts, confronting him with unwavering compassion. She made it clear this wasn't about control but survival. He entered the Betty Ford Center in October 2006, and this time, something was different. He wasn't just fighting for himself but for the woman who refused to give up on him, for the life he never believed he could have. In later interviews he described that period as a spiritual reawakening, saying, "I truly began living when I married her," and he meant it. Recovery gave him clarity, clarity gave him purpose, and purpose transformed him. In 2008 they welcomed their first daughter, Sunday Rose, whom he called the most humbling moment of his life, and in 2010 their second daughter, Faith Margaret, born via surrogate. Fatherhood grounded him. Life was no longer about escaping pain but being present, loving, and becoming the man his own father could not be. Nicole stood beside him not just as a wife but as a co-survivor of his darkest battles. She didn't save him but stood in the fire with him until he was strong enough to walk out himself. Their love story became one not of perfection but of persistence, of showing up when it was hardest, of holding the line when everything inside wanted to let go. Keith often reflects not on Grammys or chart toppers but on quiet mornings making breakfast for his girls, on long countryside walks with Nicole, on the simplicity of a hand held at the right moment. That was where he found redemption, not in applause but in being truly seen and loved. Nicole once said, "I married the man I believed in, not the one everyone else saw," and that belief carried Keith through storms that nearly destroyed him. They have weathered fame, grief, relapse, and rebirth, choosing each other again and again. Today, their home is filled not just with music and memories but with peace, and perhaps the most powerful music he ever created wasn't an album but the life he rebuilt with her, note by note, day by day, through honesty, pain, and a love that refused to let him fall. Now in his late 50s, Keith Urban stands as a man who has mastered the art of peace and balance, dividing his time among breathtaking residences across the globe. With Nicole and their daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, he lives a life rich not simply in wealth but in serenity, whether in their Nashville mansion, their historic Sutton Forest farmhouse, or their Sydney penthouse overlooking the harbor. His days are filled with music, mindfulness, and quiet joy. He continues to release work that reflects his maturity, such as his introspective 2024 album High, featuring songs like Straight Line and his duet with Lainey Wilson, Go Home W, proving he is still innovating and connecting with audiences worldwide. He remains deeply involved in mentoring younger artists, performing, appearing at charity events, and strengthening the musical community he loves. Financially, Keith has built a lasting legacy, his 2025 net worth estimated at $75 million, and together with Nicole, exceeding $250 million, solidifying them as one of entertainment's most influential power couples. His album sales surpassed 20 million worldwide, and his stint on American Idol earned him $5 million per season. His 2013 guitar line launched through HSN sold over 42,000 units in 6 months. And yet despite enormous success, his lifestyle remains grounded, rooted in Italian cooking with his daughters, daily workouts, meditation, painting as a form of internal stillness, and strict sobriety maintained with quiet discipline. His properties, from their $39 million Manhattan residence to their Mill Sun Point luxury units and their 110-acre Sutton Forest estate, are less monuments to wealth than sanctuaries for healing and family. Keith's connection to simplicity is evident in everything he chooses, never ostentatious, always meaningful. He supports causes like the Nashville Food Project and Thistle Farms, with fans participating in acts of kindness such as donating 1,200 stuffed animals to children's hospitals in his honor in early 2025. His health has never been better, emotionally clear, physically strong, spiritually grateful. Keith Urban no longer runs from pain, he embraces it as part of his truth, a truth reflected in every lyric and every note. Today he is not just a country icon but a man at peace, a father who tucks in his daughters, a husband who still looks at Nicole with the same wonder he felt the day they met, an artist who no longer chases the stage but lets the music come to him. In a world obsessed with noise, Keith Urban has found beauty in silence, and in that stillness, his legacy grows louder than ever, a mirror of resilience, a melody of healing, a quiet rebellion against despair. His story is not just about music, it is about what it means to truly live, to rise, to overcome, and to love with a heart rebuilt from ashes.